Here's the GearChmage Show. I think it's episode 107, I believe. I believe it's 107. And I think it's episode 178. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to a GearChmage Show. Here we go. This is the 45 minutes where I talk about gearboxes, cars, racing, and all that other good stuff. Today I'm going to tackle a racing topic that should take 45 minutes, and hopefully you guys will be interested. But that's the engines and the different ones of the Indy 500. So you guys are probably wondering, so what type of engines have run in the Indy 500? Well, there have been many different combinations and stuff like this. So they've run, so for those of you who don't know, they've run the Indy 500 every year. They've run it mostly every year. There's been over 100 plus editions, and there have been different engine formulas, and there's been ones that have been stuck for a while, and then there's ones that don't go away. And I'm going to clear up some myths about the stock block thing and how early those were introduced, and how the rear engine revolution sort of changed the whole idea of what the world thought of these motors. So in the early 1900s, the name of the game was big displacement. I was reading that the minimum weight for the cars was 2,300 pounds. You guys imagine an Indy car weighing 2,300 pounds. They were known as champ cars back then. That's where the term champ car comes back from, because they were championship racing cars. They could have a maximum displacement of 600 cubic inches. That was over 98.83 liters. They probably developed somewhere in the realm of maybe 150. I mean, the pole speed of the first Indy 500, there was no pole speed, because if you guys watch my qualifying methods for Grand Prix, you guys will know that they did a sweepstakes, so there was no pole speed for the Indy 500. I think the fastest race speed, I think the average speed was 75 miles an hour, I think. 75 miles an hour, I believe. And that big displacement thing, so you had race cars, so you had race cars like the Buick, you had early Chevrolets. There was a company called Frontenac, which was which was run by Gaston Chevrolet, and that was a front engine car that would play a pivotal role in the development of Indy engines. But a lot of Grand Prix cars back then, or road racing cars, had to do it. And remember, they had to do it by tires. I don't think it was until I think big displacement was the big thing in the early 1900s. In the 20s and 30s, when people had to save money, people started to do front wheel drive. The engines got slightly smaller because no one could pay $1 million for a race motor, and the purse back then wasn't very high. The purse for the Indy 500 is high now for the owner and the driver, but back then in the early 1900s, the purse for the winning team was $30,000, and the driver would be lucky to get 12 of that. So he got more than half, because most of the guys were running themselves. So, and then he'd use that to buy the car and stuff like that. And 12,000 back in 1911 was like $1 million, because I think minimum wage was like not even 5 cents, not even 10 cents an hour, I think. So that was about $1 gajillion back then, and that was a lot. That felt like $1 million. $12,000 today is pretty sizable. lump of cash, but in the grand scheme of what things cost, it's not really all that big. I mean, you can buy a nice car, used car for less than that, or you can buy a sports or classic that needs to be restored for that much money. So big displacement was kind of the big thing from 11, 29, and into the 30s. They kind of shrunk. It wasn't, 39, well, that lasted until 39. Well, that lasted until 39 because obviously the war. The Second World War. And the Second World War. That happened from, the Speedway shut down from 1941 till about 1947, and then I think it was in 48, 49 that they started to come back over again, and engines started to change. I know they had, I know the World Championship, so the Formula One World Championship, so it was not unprecedented to see a supercharged Maserati engine or a big 4.5 or a big 1.5 liter V12 from the Ferrari, from Ferrari and Maserati and stuff like that. The Americans started to kind of come around. The Americans around the 30s and 40s. I think the engine that was prevalent for the Roadsters and the cars that would power the American cars would be known as Offenhauser. Offenhauser was kind of the bread and butter after that, before Ford kind of got into the game many years later. They had Offenhauser, they had Offenhauser and the Watson Roadster that would power that would be the front engine dinosaurs that people would talk about from the 40s into the 50s into the 60s until the rear engine revolution came about. And for those of you who haven't heard an Offenhauser engine, they are quite the spectacle. I actually went to the New England Motorsport Hall of Fame induction ceremony, and they actually will start up the old little 91 cubic inch Offenhauser midgets that run the dirt, and that they ran dirt on some of the paved tracks, and then their bigger brothers would have a slightly bigger motor. In the 50s and the early 60s, the displacement would be around, the earliest cars would be around 4.2 liters, because the engines, I think in the 40s, in the 30s, Miller also had a front wheel drive motor, and then of the 50s, you had the Novi, the supercharged Novi. The Novi was, if you guys haven't heard of Novi engine, I do. Bobby Unser, one of the first guys to run, the car in a USAC. He ran the Novi, I believe, in the 50s on a lot of USAC tracks, but I don't think he ran it to the 500 until, I think, he didn't run the Novi until like the early, he ran the Novi on other tracks, and then I think he ran his first Indy 500 in 63, which would bring us to the Ford era in 63, 64, 65, 66, and 67. This is kind of when Offenhauser decided to make a 2.61 liter turbocharged V8 engine, 4-cylinder engine. Yes, you're going to hear 4-cylinder engines. You're going to hear 4-cylinder engines a lot. Dan Gurney would have Offenhauser motors and stuff like that. although Dan Gurney would actually have his own special, and kind of turbo Offenhausers were kind of ruled the roost. They had good power. They were. It was around the time I think it was in like the 40s and 50s. They had 140, 150 miles an hour, 160 miles an hour in the early 60s. Then by late 69, early 67, 68, the mid-engine revolution, and then the Ford Cosworth engine 4.2 liters started to become a thing, and it kind of started the roots for the high displacement. The Lotus 38, for those of you guys, if you guys play project cars, you guys know the Lotus 38. It's 2-speed, 500 horsepower. It's very hard to get up to 200 miles an hour. The car was only good for about maybe 100 and car back in the late 60s was probably good for probably 160, 150, 160 miles an hour. And they say the car was good for 200 miles an hour top speed, but it was very hard to do. It probably went 200 miles an hour straight line, but I bet you the average speed was, but because the aerodynamics were bad and you had to back off in the corners, and it was a 2-speed transmission. And I think it was by like I think it was by 65, 67 that the American team started to figure out, well, we're not going to get beaten by a pushrod Ford in the back of a Lotus that weighs 500, 400 pounds less than us. And yes, the Lotus 60, the Lotus 30, well, there was the Lotus 29 and the Lotus 38. Those cars both had engines that had over 380, and then by the late 60s, they had about, by 67, they had about 67, 68, they had about 495 horsepower. And I think it was by 68, 69 that the American teams guys, okay, we're not going to get our asses handed to us. We're going to turbocharge our Offenhausers. And it was around this time where the stock block rules kind of came into effect. Big displacement stock block engines kind of been around for a while, but they kind of got brought in. And the rule was if you had a stock block engine, you could run more horsepower, and bigger displacement meant more horsepower. And there was a huge difference between both of them. You get decent fuel economy out of the stock block, but you get better revs and better horsepower out of the turbo Offenhauser motor. And as Tim Coffey kind of figures, and for those of you who didn't know, the Offenhauser turbo was kind of the car. And Tim Coffey, who was a Newman Haas engineer, mechanic, and overall race coordinator, team coordinator, stood up back in the 60s and he asked Bobby Unser, the one I did a tribute video. So he goes, why do you have 305 cubic inches and you only have 150, and Bobby only has 159? And Bobby would sit there and said, son, stand up. Son, do I really need to tell you the difference between 159 cubic inch turbocharged double overhead cam Offenhauser engine versus a 305 cubic inch Gurney Westlake rocker arm motor? Son, you better put your thinking cap on. You can sit down now. So the Offenhauser was, even when McLaren came in over in the 70s, and 68, 69 is when Ford started putting out the 6.1 liter Bronner Hawks, and Foyt would sort of kind of take that. Foyt was a Ford guy, and he kind of had to deal with Ford. So it's not too uncommon because he ran the GT40 in 67. So it was also around this time that we also got, so you have the stock block. So before anybody says, oh, Roger Penske did the stock block thing, he found a loophole. Gurney used to do like 305, 312 cubic inch engines because he wanted to find the horsepower because he didn't want to, because he thought the turbocharged cars were too complicated, and he just wanted a really tried and true motor that could run and could stand up to the beating. I think Dan in the 60s I think Dan in 67, 65, 66, or 67, or 68, I think got up to second place behind Bobby. Bobby got his first one in 68, by the way. So the first major win for a turbo engine was 1968. The mid-60s was also the highs of a turbo-powered car. You guys are hearing me correctly. For you guys, if you don't know, Lotus 56, 1966, 1968, they actually put a working engine from a plane, a jet engine in a plane, in a chassis, in a Westlake fuselage, and they basically could do 200 miles an hour. And for those of you who own project cars too, you guys know exactly how fast that thing goes. It's kind of the web-shaped thing. I think a washer ended up. Andy Granatelli, Parnelli Jones was running. I think he read like 100 and like 100 laps, and then a small little washer and some connector and a brake in the knee. And I think it was Bobby Unser who actually ended up winning the Indianapolis 500. It was either that or AJ Foyt. I can't remember. It was Foyt, or I think it was Foyt or Bobby Unser. I can't remember. I think both of them won. Both of them won because the turbine, they call it the turbine or the turbine, because this was back when Chrysler and everybody else was doing, and the Hallmark car and stuff like that. And then the 70s, we started sprouting wings, and the Offenhauser stayed 159 cubic inches, and the car made over 700 horsepower. And I think by the mid 70s, Foyt did the 2.61 liter Foyt Ford engine, which made about 1,100 horsepower, and the Jorgens Eagles, which were Offenhauser, made over 1,050 horsepower. And then in the late 70s, it started to taper off, and then we started to get, and then it was by 1976, 1978, Ford came into the picture with the DFX, and March supplied the chassis, and people were happy with the engine. It was and back then, most of the cars were single turbo. For those of you guys can see photos, there's the big turbine, and there's the big exhaust-driven turbocharger. The turbine's sitting right there at the top of the motor on all the cars, just so it could get air and so it wouldn't explode, that sort of thing. Then the 80s saw then the late 70s, early 80s saw the domination of the DFX, and then Roger Penske in the 1980s, 1985, 1984, 1985, decided, you know what, I've had enough. I've got to deal with Chevrolet, and made the Chevrolet Ilmore. Put together, Ilmore was run by two guys from Cosworth, Peter Morgan and Mario Ilian and Morgan Ilmore, Cosworth, and they made an engine that would win majority of the Indy 500s. I think they won 86, 87. And I think Bobby Unser won in a, and then this was around the time the Buick stock blocks in the late 70s. This is when the 3.4 liter stock blocked engine formula came out, and it was to exploit if you could build a push rod engine. Buick made one. Buick made a couple. I'm pretty sure. It was mostly Buick and Maynard that made them, and they were actually pretty fast. Porsche ended up getting in on it. Porsche, for those of you who didn't know, in the late 80s, early 90s, Porsche ended up getting in on it. They really didn't do all that well. They got Teo Fabi and Al Unser to do it, to no avail. They they came first in a couple of races, but they never won the Indy 500. And it was a 2.65 V8, that six-cylinder that they got from their engines. Well, it was derived from their six cylinders, but they made it into a V8. And they derived it into a V8. And then in 1993, Roger Penske decided, well, I'm not done stock box. I'm going to do this now. So I'm going to. And then he got Ilmor and Penske cars and Mercedes. They struck a deal with Mercedes. It's really a Chevrolet, but they wanted to put in Mercedes because Ilmor was Chevrolet was kind of getting out of that deal, and it was really a Chevrolet basically. Because let's just put it this way: if you ever seen a pushrod engine in a Mercedes, not in your life. It's all dual overhead cam, sophisticated, high efficiency stuff. I could see the old 6.8 V8s doing that, but doing all that, but they didn't do that. So, and then, well, we had the split, and the cars ended up. Well, the reason why we got the Cosworth DFX is because, you know, the cars were getting too expensive and they were getting outlandish. The teams weren't getting paid out, and they needed an engine that was good. So the Ilmor V8 came out, and then eventually the Indy engine sort of died because 95, 96 were kind of the last years of the 2.65 stock block thing going on. I remember in 95, 96, 92, 93, it was 91, 92, 93, that it was either a Buick or a Mercedes on the pole, or a Maynard Buick on the pole. And then I think Infiniti and Chevrolet and Nissan started to take over. And, well, it was Chevrolet and an Oldsmobile with the 4-liter V8. It sounded like a NASCAR stock car, made 700 horsepower. The top speed fell, and that was kind of set the tone from the late 90s all the way up to 2011. This was kind of the dark times, and this is kind of when everything sucked. This is when we got the Panos chassis. This is when we got the G-Force and the Panos chassis, and this is when Champ Car ended up going off for its own thing, and it got the Cosworth XFE, which was a DFX. XD, XF, whatever the hell it was. It wasn't really Champ Car wasn't really Champ Car was kind of the dying moments of the kart series, which piled bankruptcy in 2003, and then of course kart died, and of course Champ Car or kart died in 2008 after 30 years, 1978, 80, 90, 2000. So like 30, 40 years, it ended up being killed off. So yeah, and then eventually they wanted higher revving engines. Nobody wanted the NASCAR engines, so they ended up going. So I think it was in like 99, 2000. 2001, they ended up going off with Chevrolet with the 3.5 liter V8, and then they shrunk the displacement because the cars were getting too fast. And that's when we started seeing speeds 225, 230, 231. And then eventually in like 2003, 2004, 2005, we got that lump, we got that reliable, boring lump of an engine, the 3.5 liter Indy V8, which was used in the Acura and the HPD LMP2 engine, LMP2 cars. For those of you guys who remember the LMP2 factory, they actually sounded like Indy engines when they started up. Actually, at Lime Rock and Le Mans and Watkins Glen, all that other good stuff. Daytona, well, not Daytona, but Sebring and stuff like that. And I got to hear those cars at Lime Rock. So the 3.5 liter formula, that 3 liter, 3.5 stretch from like 2000 ish, because remember, Kart was kind of doing its own thing, and then Kart went bankrupt, and Champ Car did its own thing, and then they fused with the IRL in 2008, and then 2011 kind of got to a head when Dan Weldon died. So they put on a safer chassis, they put better aerodynamics on it, and they put a 2.2 liter V6 from either Chevrolet, Honda, or Lotus. I don't know why Lotus was doing anything, because Lotus sucked. Lotus only went for 1 year, 2012, and we are in that, and nearly 11, 12 years later. Well, next year is going to be 12 years that we're going to have the motor. We're going to have that motor, except we're going to have a hybrid engine next year. And you know, each one of these engines ended up making a sound or something like that. I'm really not going to do it because of copyright from YouTube videos and stuff like that. You guys will have to do that on your own. But each one of the engines had their own noise. So you had the Novi, which had a supercharger scream you wouldn't believe. Then the Offenhauser engines used to have this low grumble 4-cylinder high-pitched engine, and it would go really very fast. The Ford V8s, and then you have the Ford Cosworth Lotuses and stuff like that, which actually sound like pushrod engines, kind of the first stock block engines to kind of run the Indy 500. Then you have the turbo Offenhausers that cover at DFX, which was basically a robotic screaming engine. And if you guys have heard of 265 Cosworth, it's quite the experience. And then when you get into the 90s, when the cars started getting more RPMs, the cars sounded like paper ripping. They sounded like if you listen to some of the 90s engines, they sound like they're ripping holes through the universe with the noise. It's ridiculous. It sounds like it sounds basically like a it sounds like exactly what you do. It's like and it's just got that really paper ripping high frequency scream. And then you got and then you had the turbine cars, which sounded like jet engines, and then you have the turbo cars, which sound a little growly, and they kind of sound like old Buick stock block engines a little bit, even though I think the displacement should have gone up this year to 2.65, so we could have the old engines back at least and make them V8s. Thank you. But the 2.2 liter V6s, they were going to be 4 cylinders for the FIA purposes, but then eventually they said, well, we're going to make them V6s to make them better. And they were actually, what was funny was back in 1994 when Penske got the stock block Mercedes band, they were actually thinking of going to a push rod engine of 2.2 liters, turbo V6. Than the current engines, and we actually got that, and now we have those engines. But there's different engines and different things and stuff like that, and we have better aerodynamics, speedway packages. The cars look like bricks back in the 70s, and now they're looking like streamlined rockets, and they kind of look like spaceships now with the visor and the halo on them. And I do prefer the oval setup over the big tri-oval setup over the like Texas and Michigan and the Indy 500 in Texas. That low downforce package I can't stand. It doesn't look like a race car. It kind of looks like it kind of just looks like a weird it just looks like it just looks like a spaceship on with a big wing on the back. I kind of like the normal rear wing, because you guys know they have the wing out of the air. It's no longer in the air anymore, because I don't want the cars going 230, 250 and launching off. Fun fact: when Penske actually did the Mercedes, the Mercedes actually did a trap speed on the front stretch and the back stretch of 252 miles an hour. And no, that is not kilometers. That was miles per hour. So the car, and you guys are probably wondering, so why did the car do a 228? Well, because the car handled like crap. So yeah, I hope you guys learned something about engines and stuff like that. And you know, now that we're entering the new turbo hybrid era, like Formula One is, you know, it should be interesting to see if this helps the racing a little bit. I want to see it flourish a little bit. So yeah. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I thought this was going to be 45 minutes, but I ran out of gas. And no pun intended, because I'm talking about high revving motors. So so I just wanted to kind of this was going to be a 45-minute episode, but not. So I just wanted to say to everybody, thank you. I do have a Gran Turismo video for my grandfather's tribute Camaro up. It's been uploading for the last half an hour while I've been shooting this video and stuff like that and stuff. So yeah. 1 second, guys. All right, so I'm sorry, I had to one of the men's room. That's the reason why I had the pinch face on. So I am going to upload the Gramp Tribute Camaro. It's got funny. I've been talking about Penske a little bit, and it's got the Penske. It'll have the Penske colors, although it doesn't say Penske on it. I uploaded that. That's about half an hour. I tuned the car and stuff like that. But yeah, I thought you guys. But yeah, I'm giving you guys an. I think I'm good. I think I'm giving you guys an hour of content tonight, and that's 2 vlogs in a row already. So we're starting December off right. So I hope you guys enjoyed this hour of me talking about engines, and turbo engines, Offenhausers, and turbines. Yeah, that was the thing. They did have plane engines in cars. So, but those of you who don't know, they had the Chrysler turbine car, and the Hallmott, Texas Hallmott car that they ran in IMSA, and they ran over at Le Mans. So I just want to tell you guys that was my thing. I hope you guys enjoyed this hour of me with cars. Kind of want to make this car related. I actually have 2 personal days, courtesy of my employers, because they want me to take my vacation time. They don't want me to lose it. I say yay to that. So I think the state of the channel address might be Tuesday, and I'm going to prepare for that, because I want to get it done before it's either going to be Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday. I think it might be Tuesday, because I'm home by myself, actually. And then I'm going to take some time at the end of the year. So the 20. So I'm going to be gone the 20. So I'm going to be down. I'm basically shutting myself down for the year, because I've been running like a freight train, and they were like, I told them I didn't want to use it, but they're like, no, you got to use it. You've been working hard this year. You don't want to not use it. We got you covered, yada yada yada. So I said, yeah. I was like, I don't want to use it. It's mine. I cured it. I'm like, all right, I'll use it. And then I can do fresh. So I may do some vlogs. So that may give me a chance to do some vlogs to close out the year, at least. So, and do some gameplay videos. And I'm going to try to hook up my microphone so I can do some Xbox stuff, so I can start doing some videos with the Forza. So show you some of the cars I got and do some of the career stuff. So you guys will be in for that. I'll do Gran Turismo, and then January, obviously, when you guys saw the Ford GT review video, I think like 10 of you people saw it already, which is great. But yeah, I'll see you guys later, and I hope you guys enjoy this video. Me talking about engines of the Indy 500 over the years and how they've come and gone. You guys can do your own research and stuff like that into certain engines. Certain eras are boring because, you know, they stick with one engine for like, they stick for like one engine or one type of configuration for like 10 years, and then they get something new and something comes in and monopolizes the sport. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'm gonna I'll do a regular vlog tomorrow and Monday. I may give you guys an update and on my day off on Tuesday and Wednesday. I'm gonna try to get as many of these in as I can so we can close this month out. So and close this year out. So I hope you guys are ready, strapped in, buckled in, ready to turn on those engines to the end of 2023. It's gonna be fun.